I work for the Salvation Army here in Rochester. I head their community engagement and development department. And as such, every once in a while, I'll present a speech to this club with a sort of community update. And the last speech that I gave was specific to the issue of homelessness. It was about a year ago. And the speech that I would like to give today is more specific to the times we're living in and the struggles that people are facing as a result of them. Many of the people who come to us for help are coming with needs that are, for lack of a better word, invisible. They are not people that you see on the street corner with a cardboard sign. These are single parent households who go to work every day in a car that regularly breaks down after dropping their kids off at grandma's house because there's no way that they could afford daycare. There are thousands, and I really want to let that word sink in, thousands of people who are living in this situation just in Olmsted County. We've all had many conversations about the pandemic being a challenging time for this population of people more than others. But high inflation, the end of the rent moratorium, and an end to stimulus checks, all of these things have resulted in some really very scary circumstances. Our rental assistance here at the Salvation Army, it starts anew each month. So July 1st was the first day of this month that new dollars were available and people could apply to us to prevent themselves from being evicted from their housing. Within the first 2.5 hours, so before 10:30 in the morning, we had already had 32 families reaching out to us for rental assistance to prevent eviction. I just really want to emphasize how significant that number is. 32 people were facing eviction, reached out to us in only 2.5 hours. And that pace hasn't slowed down the whole rest of the month. What makes this situation even more challenging is that these households are coming to us with several months of unpaid rent. And with the increases in rent costs in this town, that can amount to upwards of $5,000. Multiply that by 32. And this is only the first day of the month. Over the summer, we've seen an average of 40 new calls for rental assistance every week. Before the pandemic, we were able to prevent family homelessness by helping maybe 10 families a month with their rent. Just to give you a sense of how significant and intense and dramatic this shift has really been just in the last 6 months. And that's what the need looks like before evictions happen. The Women's Shelter is another partner that we have in Rochester. They're at capacity and they're currently left with no choice but to turn maybe 2 or 3 families away just about every day. Family Promise is another really important shelter for single mother households, for small families. They have a waiting list that is 23 families long. Our casework at this, I apologize. Our caseworkers at the Salvation Army are really able to only temporarily shelter 1 or 2 families a month because it takes a full month of time to find and move into another housing situation. And the funds are just not there to be able to shelter 32 households after an eviction. I had to do some research for this speech. I looked it up. There are approximately 6,000 hotel rooms in Rochester. And between us and all of our partner agencies, we're currently in a place where we could fill 50% of those rooms with people facing eviction, people who have been evicted, or people who are living in homelessness. Just out of people who are currently in Rochester, Minnesota. And that's before we really address the reality that there are simply not that many hotel rooms vacant on any given night. I know that hotels are a business and landlords haven't been paid in 2 years, and I really want to stress that these people are not the villains of this narrative. But when needs shift this rapidly, it's extraordinarily challenging for nonprofit agencies and even government support structures to keep up or to fundraise quickly enough for the many additional dollars needed to fully support this need. Another really important thing to consider is that people in need are very rarely in need of just one thing. These families are coming to us with their rent. They're not food secure. They do not have the dollars to buy new school supplies or school clothing for their kids. They often have very little health insurance, if they have any at all. Their transportation is unreliable, and their family and friend support systems are often weak, if they exist at all. This list goes on. And I want to emphasize that people do not just receive eviction notices overnight. These things build over a great deal of time. And normally it takes a lot more time. But because we live in an environment where things have shifted so rapidly in just 6 months, all of these things have really fallen on people at a very rapid, very quick pace. And there's just been no way for people to keep up with those challenges. I bring up this point because the households who qualify for our rental assistance are people who, under normal circumstances, are able to afford their housing. We do not ever put a person's rent balance back to zero, only to have them be evicted from their home 3 months later because they can't afford their housing. And I want to be clear when I talk about the extent that the population of people are in need. I'm talking about people who are really no different from anyone in this room or on this Zoom call. This year has been a challenge, to say the least. And for many people that we work with or who sit next to us on the bus every day, the challenges have just been stacking up on top of one another to the point that people just need some sort of help to lessen the weight of that load. I never want to be that person who comes on and is just very depressing and very gloomy and be one more person like what we hear on the news, just making us feel like everything is hopeless and everything is just going to continue to be a struggle. I want to give people some sense of agency, some sense of hope and steps forward whenever I come on and I talk about things like this with this club. So I have 3 closing thoughts for the group to consider. The first one is that, and I've expressed this before, exercise compassion in every way that you can. Your personal judgment of people does not better their situation, and it does not alter the circumstances that led them to be in that situation. On the other side, sometimes a kind word, as opposed to a word of criticism, can change people's lives. It sounds dramatic, it sounds cheesy. I've seen it happen. So be considerate there. My second comment is to advocate, to be dauntless. One of the many benefits of being a part of this group is that we learn something new every Thursday morning. We're all working to become better community members, better leaders, better educators. Taking the knowledge of what is truly happening in this town and sharing that knowledge truly does make it easier for us to care for people in need. Your words might reach someone who's willing to sponsor a family, or someone with hotel connections, or points that could lead to one more vacant room that can shelter people in need. Advocate and be dauntless. And my final comment is to remember that needs are fluid and ever-changing, and the uncertainty in the world right now does nothing to settle the dust. Be open-minded and resist the temptation to avoid learning about the changing needs of this community. I understand that it is so easy and so much more pleasant to turn off the news, ignore that letter from a charity, and walk away when people start talking about one more sad thing. The moment that we stop caring about all the hardship in the world is the moment that we allow people to succumb to that hardship. That's my final word. Keep caring. I'm grateful to all of you for listening to me this morning, and I'm so sorry that I have to duck out of this meeting early, but I wish you all the best. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you for listening. Toastmasters, I'll hand it back to you.